Hello, Internet friend. Today on Value Side, what's the probability of one of our geo-conflicts going hot? I'm David Ravel. Well, from Ukraine to Venezuela, our country is currently involved in a series of near geo-conflicts. It's a situation we've never seen in the modern era. Yet most people seem totally oblivious to these possible dangers. It's especially true for Wall Street, where most of the investing class dismisses any risk with a shrug. The urgency of these conflicts and the needs for immediate attention cannot be overstated. This ho-hum attitude comes because we're looking at each conflict individually. We mistakenly believe that because it's unlikely that a given conflict will escalate, it's also unlikely that any of these conflicts will escalate. And that's wrong thinking. The potential consequences of these conflicts escalating into a hot war are grave and should not be underestimated. Now, our current situation with multiple conflicts, each with an unknown outcome, is a perfect fit for a discipline of mathematics called probability theory. This unique approach could provide valuable insight into our current geopolitical risks. Let's take a unique approach to our current situation. We'll assign a probability score to each of the geo-conflicts that the United States is currently involved in, ranging from 0, highly unlikely, to 10, almost a certainty. This may seem somewhat crude, but you may be surprised at the insight this kind of analysis can provide. Indeed, you may disagree with the scores I assign to each conflict, and if so, please join us in the comments section with your estimates. It is not an exact science, but it aims to provide an overview of the current geopolitical risks that the U.S. faces. Your perspectives are crucial in refining our probability scores, and the more we add, the better our assessment will be. So first, criteria. The question we're asking is whether any of these conflicts is likely to involve the United States in direct military confrontation, something that would go beyond merely supplying logistics support, as we do for Ukraine and Israel, to the actual use of U.S. weapons and personnel in combat. Israel versus Palestine. So the conflict in Gaza and the West Bank has been ongoing for nearly 2 years. And although the IDF is dependent upon U.S.-supplied weapons and logistics, it's doubtful that this would require direct U.S. combat support. However, this might change should an outside force join Hamas in the battle, and there are rumors that Ansar Allah would consider sending troops to Gaza, but cannot transport those troops currently. If that were to occur, it would dramatically change the dynamics. Nonetheless, I'll give the probability of direct U.S. combat support in Gaza as very low. Score 1.0. Israel versus Yemen, or Ansar Allah. The exchange between Israel and Yemen is another ongoing conflict that, as yet, does not involve the U.S. other than as logistic support for Israel. Recently, Israel killed the Yemeni leadership, and Ansar Allah, also known as the Houthis, vowed retaliation. It is this retaliation that's most interesting. On September 7th, Ansar Allah launched a slow-moving drone from Yemen over 1,000 kilometers to the Ramon airport, where the drone hit the terminal, closing the airport for some time. But here's the significance of the attack. This drone was not detected or shot down by Israeli air defense, the vaunted Iron Dome. It indicated to the world that Israel's air defense may be substandard, far below the capability needed to ward off a major attack. And that fact alone may be sufficient to embolden Israel's enemies, of which there are many, to engage in just such an attack. If that were to occur, the United States under the Trump administration would almost certainly engage in the conflict. We score this 1.5. Israel versus Iran. On June 22nd, the United States directly attacked the country of Iran in Operation Midnight Hammer, the purpose of which was to mitigate Iran's ability to produce a nuclear bomb. Although America's chief objective was to deny Iran's offensive nuclear capability, it's more reasonable to see this attack as a continued support for Israel's attack, which began on June 13. Recently, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has indicated a willingness to, quote, go after Iran once again. In light of the recent Shanghai Cooperation Summit, where Iranian President Pezeshkian strengthened Iran's ties to China, Israel may now look to attack before Chinese military hardware can reach Iran. This dynamic situation promises to get even tighter. We'll score this 2.0. Russia versus Ukraine. Now, the war in Ukraine has raged for over 3.5 years, and it's easy to assume that it is merely a stalled conflict, with little happening now. But nothing could be further from reality. Both sides have suffered significant damage, with the much smaller Ukrainian population at the beginning of the war, less than 40 million, incurring a greater percentage loss than Russia, with a population of over 140 million. Consequently, Ukraine is currently experiencing a decline in human resources on the front line of the conflict. Additionally, Russia appears to be increasing its pace of attack with 2 missile drone combination volleys of over 500 each. Russia has increased its attacks on Zaporizhia, Sumy, and now Odessa. And it's critical to note that Odessa is strategically one of the most important cities in Ukraine, with the 3rd largest population, and, most critically, Odessa is Ukraine's principal port. Its loss would be devastating, interrupting supplies and Ukraine's ability to ship produce overseas. President Trump responded to these developments by threatening to increase sanctions on Russia, but he did not specify what those sanctions might be. If Ukraine deteriorates further, the question becomes what steps might the U.S. take beyond sanctions? Now, leaders from France, Germany, and the United Kingdom are on record as encouraging the president to provide troops in some peacekeeping or support effort for Ukraine. The Ukrainian war is highly fluid and subject to dramatic changes and developments. We'll score this conflict 2.0. The United States versus Venezuela. Recently, President Trump ordered the deployment of a naval flotilla off the shores of Venezuela. The stated objective is to interdict any illicit drugs coming from that South American country to the United States. However, this is far from an ordinary Coast Guard operation, although that would be the usual response. No, this operation appears to be significant enough to support a land invasion. Included in their operation are 3 Aegis-class guided missile destroyers, our very best, several amphibious assault vessels, an overhead surveillance aircraft, and a nuclear-powered fast attack submarine. On board those ships are more than 4,000 U.S. Marines ready to go into action at the commander's orders. However, the president insists that the operation is strictly aimed at drug interdiction. Indeed, so far, the flotilla has destroyed 1 outboard motor launch, reportedly carrying illicit contraband. This operation warrants close monitoring, as any force of this magnitude carries a risk that is certainly greater than 0. Score Venezuela 1.0. So the question we're asking is, what's the likelihood or probability that one of these geo-conflicts may turn hot, that is, deteriorate to the point that the United States will commit forces, either land, sea, or air, to direct combat? Probability theory is looking only at the collective risk of all the geo-conflicts combined and does not look at any one conflict. So the calculation of the overall probability is determined by adding the scores together. There is a 7.5% chance out of 10 that we will be in a significant conflict in the very near future. Put another way, there's a 75% chance, using our scores, that America will be embroiled in a hot war shortly. Please note, my assignment of scores was subjective, and you may or may not agree. Again, please feel free to assign your scores in the comments below. Also, the selection of conflicts was subjective. Most notably, I've omitted such potential conflicts as Taiwan, Syria, Libya, and likely others. But here's the point. While we may debate the scores for any individual geo-conflict, the fact remains that the more conflicts we're involved in dramatically escalates our potential risk. Under this administration, the number of disputes continues to increase, something that most of us fervently prayed would not happen. But the reality is, as a country, we are continuing to climb the risk ladder. And that's today's Value Side. For all of our articles, references, and podcasts, visit valueside.com. I'm David Revell. ValueSide is independently written and researched. The views expressed are strictly my own.